Hello, Honors Geometry students. This is Mrs. Kamenar taking you through today's measurement notes. As you may recall from our video last week, watching an educational video is different than watching something on Netflix. As you are going through, please make sure that you pause periodically and write notes, and if you need to, rewind our video. Okay, but for now, let's jump in. We are still in Unit 1 where we're dealing with the basics of geometry, and today's topic is measurement. Our essential question is, how can I precisely draw and measure line segments and angles? And we're addressing Learning Targets 1A, where we can precisely define geometric terms, as well as this is going to be tied in with our other lesson for the week, where we can use the segment and angle addition postulates from Target 3A. All right, so let's jump in. We'll start with a refresher of line segments. Remember, with line segments, we have endpoints on each end, so we have little dot guys on the end. Okay, so let's say I'm dealing with something with endpoints A and B, and even if I have something hanging out in the middle, I would name this as line segment AB with the bar or without the bar, and I can reverse it as well, so I could call this line segment BA with or without the bar. And remember that we don't even use that point X in the middle. All right, when you want to measure a line segment, so we have our ruler hanging out here, and then whatever item that we are trying to measure, we want to make sure that we are lined up with wherever the 0 is on our ruler. As we are measuring in centimeters, we probably want to deal with the nearest tenth of a centimeter most often. As we are dealing with measuring, and I'm not sure if I have quite enough, but each of those little dashes in between each of our whole centimeters is going to be 1/10 or 0.1. If we're dealing with inches, depending on your ruler, it might be each little dash might indicate 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch. Just make sure that you check out how many little dashes you have broken up per inch. All right, example 1, if we're measuring in centimeters. Okay, so notice on that left-hand edge, we're lined up with the 0. And then as we are measuring the length of the screw, it is one little dash beyond the 5, so the length is 5.1 centimeters. Okay, and make sure you include that unit on here as well. Okay. Cruising along, if we are going to be measuring in inches, this particular ruler image has a bunch of little dashes. Notice that we have a 1/2 inch marked as the longest line between the 2 and 3 inches, for example. Then we break that down into the second longest, which is going to be a 1/4 inch, then an 1/8 inch, and then all the tiny little ones are going to be 1/16 of an inch. All right, so if we are going to measure this line, pause the video to see if you can take a moment to measure this on your own. Since I notice that it's between 2 and 3, so I know I have 2 full inches, and then I look and I have 1, 2, 3 of those longer length dashes there. And remember, that's going to be eighths, so 3/8 of an inch, and you can use the double quote mark to indicate that, or 2 3/8 inch and write it out. Okay, cruising along, when we talk about angles, our definition, angles are formed by 2 rays with the same endpoint, and that common endpoint is called the vertex. Okay. So, if I'm going to draw an angle, okay, over here, where those 2 rays meet, that's called our vertex, and I've labeled it point A. I can throw some other points on there as well. In this particular instance, I can name this angle BAC. I could name it angle CAB, or just angle A. Because there is only one angle that I could possibly be talking about, I can name it with a single letter. If I have a different instance where I have something that looks like this, if I want to refer to this angle that's hanging out on the left-hand side, The appropriate names for this would be angle XWY or angle YWX. I could not call this angle W because I don't know which part of angle W I'm referring to. So I would need to name that with 3 points. Okay, let's refresh our memory on some types of angles. We have an acute angle. That's an angle where our measurement is less than 90 degrees. Okay, a quick little diagram of what that might look like. A right angle or a 90-degree angle. Okay, and I would draw that in, and it looks like this, like the corner of our paper. Remember from last week we learned that we might put a little box or a little square in the corner to indicate that it's truly 90 degrees. An obtuse angle is more than 90. Okay, so something like this is an example of an obtuse angle, more than 90. And a straight angle is 180 degrees, also referred to as a line. Okay, so those are our 4 different types of angles. Okay, cruising along. When we measure an angle, we're going to use a protractor here. Okay, so when we measure an angle, we want to make sure that one of our rays of our angle are lined up with that 0 marking. And when we go through and measure an angle, I'm going to put this over in the side. Okay, I want you to ask, does it look acute? Okay, so remember that's less than 90. Or obtuse? Okay, so you're going to ask yourself that question. And the reason we're going to ask ourselves this question is because you'll notice as we're checking out our protractor, we have 2 different sets of numbers. So if I take a look from left to right, it goes from 0 to 180, but then I have another set that goes from 180 down to 0. So when we are deciding which set of numbers to use, if our angle looks acute, we'll use the smaller number. If it looks obtuse, we'll use the larger number. So if I take a look, and I'm going to take a look here, I notice that the second ray of my angle is hanging out between, first of all, I'm going to notice that it is an acute looking angle. It looks less than 90 degrees. And since it's acute, I'm going to use that smaller set of numbers. And I notice that I'm hanging out between the 10 and 20. Each of these little markings indicates 1 degree. So in this instance, I can count 8 degrees up from 10 up to where that ray comes through. So the measure of this angle is 18 degrees. Okay. One way that you might see this indicated, so let's put some endpoints on here as well so we can label it. We might write a little small m to stand for measure and say the measure of angle ABC is equal to 18 degrees. So that's one way that you might write that out using appropriate geometric labeling. Okay, taking a look at the next one. In this next instance, we start by asking ourselves, is this acute or obtuse? Okay, so take a moment, answer that question, measure the angle, and then pause. Okay, so coming back, I notice that this is an obtuse angle. It's more than 90 degrees, so that means I'm going to be using those larger numbers. So in this instance, I'm going to take a look. My ray over here on this right-hand side is already lined up with the 0 degree. So over here, I'm going to take a look, and I notice that I'm hanging out between the 120 and the 130. And I am 2 little dashes past that thicker line in between, so that's going to be, that thicker line in between is going to be 25, so 27 degrees. So 127 degrees, pardon me. Okay. All right, we have one more to take a look, and this one's a little funkier. Okay, so in this case, we're finding the measure of angle LAD. So first thing that we need to do is decide what angle we're talking about. So pause the video and highlight angle LAD. Okay. Hopefully you highlighted L to A to D, this angle that I have highlighted in yellow. Okay, so you'll notice here that we are not lined up with that bottom section of our protractor where it goes to 0. And in this case, we can't twist the protractor because it's locked in place on the paper on our iPad. So what we need to do is determine how many degrees we have hanging out in this area. So I can just do it the old-fashioned way and count, or I could do a little bit of subtraction, it's up to you. So notice here that I'm at 70. To get to 80, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So the measure of angle LAD is 90 degrees. I could have also taken that 160 degrees that passes through where I find point D and subtract 70 to get 90 degrees. All right, so that was our quick run through of measurement, some reminders there. Please take a moment to write your reflection, so that might be a quick little summary of the answer to our essential question: how do I appropriately measure and measure line segments as well as angles? Our homework is going to be the measurement worksheet, which you can find linked on Blackboard. You can also find it on Google Classroom. There's a link there as well. You're going to complete this either on the paper copy that you have or through Notability. And when you're, wait, scratch that. I don't think you have a paper copy. So you're going to complete this through Notability and you're going to submit this through Google Classroom. All right, please let me know if you have any questions. I will see you in class. Bye.